Hi, my name is Zoe McClintock, and I will be taking you through the lives of my grandparents and what it was like to grow up in Detroit and what they experienced while in Detroit, as well as some historical events that are tied to them, me, and my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents. So stay tuned. What was it like growing up when you were little in Detroit?
It was great. We both went to Winship Elementary School.
Here you'll see the elementary school that my grandmother and grandfather both attended in Detroit.
Between our houses was Peterson Park, and during the summer they had all sorts of arts and crafts. They had band concerts in the summer. They had a softball team. In the wintertime, they used to flood the park so that everyone could go ice skating. So my neighborhood was great.
And then I lived across the street from Sinai Hospital, and there was a big open field right across the street. And we used to play baseball there and football. And when we first moved in, there was like a woods there, and we used to play in the woods and climb the trees and stuff. But eventually, after about I was 10, they cleared that out for the hospital and made it an open field, and that's when we used to play baseball and football and things like that. So it was a good place to grow up.
This is the park that my grandma and grandpa used to play at, and coming up are my grandpa's house as well as my grandma's house that they used to grow up in Detroit, and where they pretty much spent their entire lives. Their entire lives, just up until they went to college, and then they moved to Lansing where they had my dad. That's cool.
So we both were active in our church, and our beautiful church, Westminster Presbyterian Church, is still standing as an active congregation.
This is a photograph of the church that my grandma and grandpa used to go to in Detroit.
Not like it was when we grew up there. On Easter Sunday, they would have standing room only, chairs up and down all the aisles, a congregation of over 3,000. I think now there's probably a congregation of about 350. So the neighborhood has really changed. The church has really changed, but we both were involved in scouts through the church, choirs through the church, lots of activity. In the 8th grade, and our elementary school became a junior high. So it went through 9th grade, and then we both went to Cooley High School in the 10th grade. That's where we graduated.
Here's a short video of my grandparents' high school they went to. This was Cooley High School in Detroit. It's crazy because it's really pretty, and high schools today just don't really compare to what old high schools used to look like.
Cooley was a huge powerhouse football school, so that was a lot of fun. Didn't they go to the city championship?
Yep, they won the city championship. We were in 10th grade, and then they made the championship game in the 11th grade. So we got to see them play and go watch them play. And that was a big part of the high school after school activities.
The other big piece is that we both were in Glee Club and choir, and our Cooley High School music department was very famous. We sang with the Detroit Symphony. We put on musical plays along with the church. The church also put on musicals. So that was a big part of our high school growing up too, was being a part of all of the choir and Glee Club events.
What was it like living in Detroit during the 1960s?
So we graduated from high school in 65 and went on to go to Highland Park Community College. At least that's where I went. He went to the University of Michigan. But Highland Park, you know, some of the famous alumni were Stevie Wonder. And so we had a dance, and Stevie Wonder came and sang and played at our dance. Going to Highland Park allowed me to go on their elementary internship program, with MSU. So I actually started teaching when I was a senior in college, which was a great experience. All my methods classes were with 8 kids, so it was totally personalized. We were all being trained to teach in the inner city of Detroit, and so I then proceeded to teach for Detroit Public Schools until we moved to Lansing. But when you were asking about the riots, and I actually was teaching summer school when the riots broke out, and our staff at the school was a racially mixed staff, and I used to catch a ride to a bus stop with a black teacher, and when the riots broke out, we were really afraid that she would be seen with a white young teacher in the car, and so I laid down on the seat until we got out of the city far enough away that there wasn't any trouble going on.
The trait in this instance would be hard work and the American dream. My grandparents never failed to follow that trait of the American dream and just working hard, because they always worked hard, and honestly they didn't really have very much money, and they really worked to where they are now. As my grandma said, she became a teacher when she was a senior in college, and she just worked really hard from there, and now she's a director of Head Start, and my grandpa works at the state of Michigan, and it's just like that's really one of the defining traits of an American is hard work and perseverance and just living out the American dream.
Advantages to growing up in Detroit. I took art lessons at the Detroit Institute of Art. Our parents were, both our parents were docents at the Art Museum. We loved the Art Institute.
Here's a quick video of the front of the DIA.
We also, as part of high school, got to go to plays and operas at the Hillberry Theater. So that was pretty exciting. Been to the Detroit Symphony several times. So growing up in Detroit afforded a lot of cultural experiences that were not necessarily available to many kids.
Cool.
One of the other things that we used to go to is the Detroit Zoo, which is one of the best zoos in the country, and it was the first zoo to have where the animals were not in cages, that they were in open areas that you could see them with moats around them and stuff. So even as small children, we went, and we used to go probably every year, and there was a train you'd go around, and it was fun to do. The other thing we like to do is go to Detroit Tiger games, and even in our elementary school, if you were a safety boy, a crossing guard.
Another defining trait that I would like to introduce here before the next video clip is tradition. In America, we have this tendency to follow with tradition and continue doing things from family to family, and my grandma explains coming up that throughout my father's and my uncles' and my aunt's lives, they continue the traditions of going to the Detroit Institute of Arts and going to the Detroit Zoo and going to Canada and just really keeping up with those family ties. And I think that's another big trait of Americans, is that we continue family heritage and we continue advocating for our history.
And several of these experiences we carried on with our children. Taking them to the zoo, taking them to a tiger game. One of the things that our kids love to do is go into Canada. So go across the Ambassador Bridge, go into Canada, go to the McDonald's because they could get Canadian money, and also the milk was in French, and they thought that was really cool.
So coming up next, we have our final historical trait that I believe is very crucial within America, and that would be sacrifice. I feel that as Americans, we sacrifice a lot. We lose loved ones, we lose jobs, we lose opportunities, we lose lots of things. And I noticed coming up is with my great great grandfather's store, is that he lost it in a fire, and yeah, he kept moving on and he kept providing for his family. And I think that sacrifice just like really defines us as America, because truly we lose every day. And yeah. Just a quick historical fact. This is a picture of an old drugstore that my great-great-grandfather used to own in Detroit, and it actually burned down during the riots. And this is a video of what it looks like now. Well, the space at where it used to be, what it looks like now. Another quick piece of history is the Burroughs factory, where my great-grandmother used to work during World War II, and this is a video of the windows that were actually painted over to keep the factory dark and unseeable to the Nazis, because if they didn't paint the windows, then the light would shine through, and then they couldn't work throughout the night, and this allowed them to keep producing what they needed to and keep fighting the war even throughout the night and to protect them from the enemies. Furthermore, this building was actually a target for the Nazis, so that's pretty much the main reason of why they covered the windows. I just wanted to give a big thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little peek into history of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents' lives of growing up in Detroit.